Have you ever felt a chill down your spine for no reason? That unexplained sensation that someone's watching you, even when you're alone? I used to dismiss such notions as mere superstition, that is, until the day she appeared outside my antique shop. My name is Jack, and I've owned timeless treasures for nearly 3 decades. Nestled in the heart of a quaint New England town, my store is a haven for collectors and history buffs alike. Every item on my shelves has a story, each more fascinating than the last, but none could compare to the tale I'm about to share. It was a crisp autumn morning when I first noticed her. The leaves had just started to turn, painting the street in hues of gold and crimson. I was arranging a new display in the front window, an ornate Victorian music box I'd acquired at an estate sale the previous weekend. As I placed it carefully on a velvet cushion, I caught a glimpse of movement in my peripheral vision. Turning my head, I saw her standing on the sidewalk, just beyond the large plate glass window. She was strikingly beautiful, with porcelain skin and long, raven black hair that cascaded down her shoulders. Her dress was oddly old-fashioned, a high-necked lace affair that seemed more suited to the previous century than our modern times. But it was her eyes that truly captured my attention, deep, dark pools that seemed to hold untold secrets. I smiled and gave a friendly wave, expecting her to enter the shop, but she remained motionless, staring intently at the music box I'd just placed on display. Her gaze was so intense, so focused, that I felt a shiver run through me despite the warmth of the store. After a moment, I shrugged off the strange feeling and went about my day. Customers came and went, and I soon forgot about the mysterious woman outside. But as closing time approached and I began to tidy up, I glanced out the window and froze. She was still there, in the exact same spot, her eyes fixed on the music box. I walked to the door, intending to invite her inside before I closed up shop, but as soon as I stepped onto the sidewalk, she vanished. One moment she was there, and the next gone, as if she'd never existed at all. I stood there for a long moment, blinking in confusion and trying to make sense of what I'd just witnessed. That night, I tossed and turned in bed, unable to shake the image of the woman from my mind. Her haunting eyes, her otherworldly stillness, it all seemed so surreal. I told myself I was being silly, that there must be a logical explanation. Perhaps she was just shy, or maybe she'd walked away when I wasn't looking. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. The next morning, I arrived at the shop earlier than usual, half expecting and half dreading to see her there again. To my relief, the street was empty save for a few early risers hurrying to work. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, breathing in the familiar scent of old books and polished wood. As I flipped on the lights, my eyes were drawn to the music box in the window. It sat exactly where I'd left it, gleaming in the soft morning light, but something about it seemed different, though I couldn't quite put my finger on what had changed. Curious, I approached the display and carefully lifted the delicate lid. A haunting melody filled the air, notes tinkling softly in the quiet shop. I frowned, certain that I hadn't wound it the day before. As the tune played on, I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. There was something eerie about the music, a melancholy quality that seemed to seep into my very bones. I was so engrossed in the music that I almost missed the movement outside the window. My head snapped up, and there she was again, the woman in the old-fashioned dress, staring at me with those fathomless eyes. This time, I was determined to speak with her. I rushed to the door, throwing it open and stepping out onto the sidewalk. "Excuse me, miss," I called out, "can I help you with something?" But once again, she was gone. I spun in a circle, searching the empty street, but there was no sign of her. Confused and more than a little unnerved, I retreated back into the shop. Throughout the day, I found myself constantly glancing out the window, half expecting to see her materialize at any moment, but she didn't appear, and I tried to convince myself that I was simply letting my imagination run wild. As the week wore on, however, the strange occurrences continued. Each morning, I'd arrive to find the music box wound and playing its haunting melody, and every day, at precisely 3:17 p.m., the woman would appear outside my window, her gaze fixed on the antique in the display. I began to dread that time of day, my stomach knotting with anxiety as the hour approached. I tried speaking to her, waving to catch her attention, even running outside to intercept her, but each time, she would vanish into thin air the moment I stepped foot on the sidewalk. My obsession with the mysterious woman began to take its toll. I couldn't sleep, spending long hours researching local history and scouring old newspapers for any clue to her identity. I became snappish with customers, my mind constantly preoccupied with the enigma outside my window. It was Mrs. Abernathy, a regular customer in town gossip, who finally provided a breakthrough. She'd come in looking for a gift for her granddaughter and noticed the dark circles under my eyes. "You look like you've seen a ghost, Jack," she said, peering at me over her glasses. "Is everything all right?" I hesitated for a moment before deciding to confide in her. As I described the woman and her strange behavior, Mrs. Abernathy's eyes grew wide. "Oh my," she breathed, "that sounds just like Elizabeth Blackwood." The name sent a chill through me. "Who's Elizabeth Blackwood?" I asked, dreading the answer. Mrs. Abernathy's voice dropped to a whisper, as if she were sharing a terrible secret. She was a local girl, back in the 1890s, quite the beauty, by all accounts, but she had a tragic end. I leaned in closer, hanging on her every word. "What happened to her?" "Well," Mrs. Abernathy continued, clearly relishing the chance to share the macabre tale, "the story goes that Elizabeth was engaged to a wealthy young man from Boston. He gifted her an exquisite music box as an engagement present, said to be the most beautiful ever crafted." My blood ran cold as I glanced at the Victorian music box in my window display. On the day of their wedding, Mrs. Abernathy went on, Elizabeth was getting ready in her room, but when it came time for the ceremony, she was nowhere to be found. They searched for days, but she had vanished without a trace. Some say she ran away, others believe she met with foul play, but her body was never found, and the mystery was never solved. I struggled to keep my voice steady as I asked, "In the music box? What became of it?" Mrs. Abernathy shrugged. "No one knows for sure. It disappeared along with Elizabeth. Some say it was cursed, that it brought misfortune to anyone who possessed it." After Mrs. Abernathy left, I stood for a long time staring at the music box in my window. Could it really be the same one from the legend? And if so, what did it mean that Elizabeth or her ghost had appeared outside my shop? That night, I stayed late at the store, determined to solve the mystery once and for all. As the clock ticked closer to midnight, I wound the music box and waited, my heart pounding in my chest. The melody began to play, soft and melancholy in the darkened shop, and then, as the final notes faded away, I heard it, a soft whisper, barely audible over the ticking of the antique clocks that surrounded me. "Help me!" I spun around, searching for the source of the voice, and there she was, Elizabeth Blackwood, standing in the middle of my shop, but this time, she looked different. Her skin was pale and translucent, her form shimmering like a mirage in the desert. "Elizabeth," I whispered, hardly daring to believe my eyes. She nodded, a sad smile playing on her lips. "I've been trying to reach you, Jack, to warn you." "Warn me? About what?" Her eyes darted to the music box. "It's not what you think, the story, it's all wrong." I took a hesitant step towards her. "What do you mean? What really happened to you?" Elizabeth's form flickered, like a candle flame in a breeze. "I didn't disappear on my wedding day. I died long before that, killed by the man I thought loved me." Her words sent a chill down my spine. "Your fiancé? But why?" "Greed," she said simply. "He wanted my family's fortune. When I discovered his true nature, he murdered me and hid my body. The music box, it was never a gift. It was where he concealed the evidence of his crime." I glanced at the antique, seeing it in a new, horrifying light. "What evidence?" "My locket," Elizabeth whispered. "It contains a strand of my hair and a small portrait. But it's not just any locket, it's enchanted. When opened by the right person, it reveals the truth of what happened to me." I glanced at the antique, seeing it in a new, horrifying light. "What truth?" "The locket holds my final memories," Elizabeth explained, her voice trembling. "When opened, it will show visions of my murder, the face of my killer, the location of my remains. It's all there, preserved by magic and my own desperate desire for justice." "Why didn't you tell anyone before?" I asked. "Why appear to me now?" Elizabeth's form began to fade. The locket's magic is particular, Jack. It will only reveal its secrets to someone pure of heart, someone with no connection to my killer or his descendants. You're the first in over a century to fit that description and to truly see me, to listen. I felt a surge of determination. Tell me what to do. How can I help you? Find the locket, she said, her voice growing fainter. Open it and witness the truth. Only then can the visions be shared with others, and only then can I finally rest. With those words, Elizabeth vanished, leaving me alone in the darkened shop. For a long moment, I stood frozen, trying to process everything I'd just learned. Then, with shaking hands, I approached the music box. It took hours of careful examination before I found the hidden compartment, and there, nestled in faded velvet, lay a tarnished silver locket. My heart raced as I gently lifted it from its resting place, feeling its weight in my palm. With trembling fingers, I opened the clasp. Inside, just as Elizabeth had said, was a small portrait of a beautiful young woman, Elizabeth herself, and a lock of dark hair tied with a faded ribbon. But as I gazed at these mementos, something extraordinary began to happen. The shop around me faded away, replaced by swirling mist. When it cleared, I found myself standing in a lavishly decorated bedroom from another era. Elizabeth stood before a mirror, adjusting her wedding veil. She looked radiant, full of life and hope. Suddenly, the door burst open. A man entered, handsome, but with cold, calculating eyes. I recognized him from old photographs as Elizabeth's fiancé. Words were exchanged, too faint for me to hear, but I could see the fear growing in Elizabeth's eyes. The scene shifted. Now we were in a secluded garden. Elizabeth was backing away, pleading. Her fiancé advanced, a look of rage distorting his features. I wanted to cry out, to intervene, but I was powerless, a mere observer to this tragedy from the past. With horrifying swiftness, he struck. Elizabeth fell, her white dress stained crimson. I watched, sickened, as her killer concealed her body in a hidden chamber beneath an old oak tree. The vision faded, and I found myself back in my shop, gasping for air. The locket lay open in my hand, its magic spent but its message delivered. I knew what I had to do. As dawn broke, I sat at my desk, still reeling from what I had witnessed. This wasn't just about solving a century-old murder. It was about bringing peace to a tormented soul and justice to a killer who had escaped punishment. With a deep breath, I picked up the phone and dialed the local police station. As I waited for someone to answer, I glanced at the music box. For a brief moment, I thought I saw Elizabeth's reflection in its polished surface, a look of gratitude in her eyes. "Thank you," her voice whispered on the wind, and then she was gone. In the days that followed, the story of Elizabeth Blackwood's murder and the subsequent cover-up rocked our small town. The visions from the locket, which I was able to share with the authorities through some unexplained magic, led to a full investigation. They found Elizabeth's remains exactly where the vision had shown, bringing long-awaited closure to a tragic mystery. As for the music box and locket, I donated them to the local historical society. It seemed fitting that Elizabeth's story should be preserved, a cautionary tale about the dangers of greed and the power of truth. The locket, however, never revealed its visions again, its purpose fulfilled, its magic faded. The descendants of Elizabeth's killer faced the harsh light of truth. While they couldn't be held legally responsible for their ancestors' crimes, many chose to make amends by establishing a foundation in Elizabeth's name, dedicated to helping victims of domestic violence. Sometimes, late at night when the shop is quiet, I think I catch a glimpse of Elizabeth out of the corner of my eye. But it's different now. She's no longer the sorrowful specter trapped between worlds. Instead, she appears peaceful, finally free to move on to whatever lies beyond. And me? Well, I'll never look at the antiques in my shop quite the same way again. Each item holds a story, some joyful, some tragic, but now I know that sometimes, if we listen closely enough, those stories are waiting to be told. The experience changed me profoundly. I became more than just an antique dealer. I became a keeper of stories, a guardian of memories. I started researching the history of each piece that came into my shop, seeking out the tales of joy, sorrow, and everything in between that they carried. I also became more attuned to the subtle energies around me, Sometimes, when handling a particularly old or significant item, I'd feel a whisper of its past, a fleeting emotion, a glimpse of a long-gone place. It was never as vivid as my experience with Elizabeth's locket, but it was enough to remind me that the past is never truly gone. It lives on in the objects we leave behind, in the stories we tell, and sometimes, in the spirits that linger. My shop, Timeless Treasures, took on new meaning. It became a place where the past and present intertwined, where forgotten stories could be rediscovered and honored. Customers would often comment on the special atmosphere of the place, a sense of reverence, of history coming alive. As for Elizabeth, I never saw her full apparition again after that fateful night, but sometimes, when a young couple admires the display of vintage engagement rings, I feel a warm presence nearby, or when I'm closing up shop on a quiet evening, I'll hear the faint strains of a wedding march drifting through the air, and I smile, knowing that Elizabeth has found her peace at last. So the next time you pass by an antique shop and feel a sudden chill, or notice something out of the corner of your eye, remember Elizabeth's tale, for in the world of timeless treasures, not all spirits are content to remain silent. Some are simply waiting for the right person to hear their story and set them free. And who knows? Perhaps you'll be the one to unlock the next hidden history, to bring light to a long-forgotten tale. After all, every antique has a story, and some stories are just waiting for the right person to listen. Don't forget to hit the like button, share with fellow horror fans, and subscribe for more spine-chilling stories.